I never thought my own son would steal from me. The day I discovered $47,000 missing from my retirement account, I was watering the small herb garden on my apartment balcony in Seattle. 35 years of careful accounting. Of saving every penny after my husband died when Leo was just 12. I had sacrificed vacations, new clothes, even my dream of opening a flower shop, all to ensure my son had everything he needed. The bank statement lay open on my kitchen table, showing transfer after transfer to accounts I didn't recognize. Leo had access to help with my bills when my arthritis flared up. But this wasn't helping, this was theft. Would you believe a mother could crash her own son's wedding to get justice? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I sat staring at that bank statement for what felt like hours, my hands trembling as I traced the numbers with my finger. $47,000, gone. Each transaction was dated over the past 6 months. Small amounts at first, 500 here, 1,000 there, then larger chunks that made my stomach clench. The transfers were made to something called Jensen's Wolof Wedding Fund. My apartment felt smaller suddenly, the walls pressing in around me. I'd lived here for 8 years now, ever since I retired from the accounting firm where I'd worked for 3 decades. It was a modest 1-bedroom in Fremont, nothing fancy, but it was mine. The rent was reasonable, and I could walk to the market and the library. Most importantly, it was close enough to Leo's downtown condo that he could visit easily, though those visits had become increasingly rare. I walked to the window and looked out at the canal, watching a pair of kayakers navigate the choppy water. The October afternoon was grey and drizzly, typical Seattle weather that usually comforted me. Today it felt oppressive. I thought about calling Leo immediately, demanding an explanation, but something held me back. Maybe it was the accountant in me, trained to gather all the facts before drawing conclusions. Or maybe it was the mother in me, hoping against hope that there was some reasonable explanation. The wedding fund, Jensen, that had to be Nadia's last name. I'd met her exactly 3 times in the 2 years they'd been together. She seemed nice enough, blonde, pretty, with a laugh that reminded me of wind chimes. But Leo had never mentioned marriage, let alone a wedding that required $47,000 of my money. I picked up the framed photo from my side table, the one of Leo at his college graduation. He was grinning widely, his arm around my shoulders, both of us squinting in the bright June sunshine. I remember that day so clearly, how proud I was, how he'd whispered, "Thank you for everything, Mom," in my ear during the ceremony. I'd cried then, thinking of his father who should have been there to see it. Stefan had died in a car accident when Leo was 12. A drunk driver ran a red light on a rainy Tuesday evening, and just like that, our whole world changed. I was 37, suddenly a widow with a grieving preteen and a mortgage I could barely afford on my salary alone. Those early years were the hardest of my life, working overtime to make ends meet, helping Leo with homework while fighting my own exhaustion. Trying to be both parents when I felt like I was failing at being one, but we made it through. Leo thrived in high school, got a scholarship to the University of Washington, graduated with honors in business. He landed a good job at a tech company downtown, climbed the ladder quickly. I was so proud of the man he'd become, confident, successful, ambitious, maybe too ambitious. I set the photo down and walked to my small kitchen, automatically putting the kettle on for tea. The routine was soothing, something to do with my hands while my mind raced. As the water heated, I opened the kitchen drawer where I kept all my important papers, pulling out the folder labeled Leo, Emergency Access. Inside were the documents I'd signed 2 years ago, when my arthritis had gotten bad enough that sometimes I couldn't write checks or manage my online banking. Leo had been so helpful then, so patient with my frustration at not being able to do simple tasks. "It's just temporary, Mom," he'd said. "Just until you feel better. And this way, I can help you pay bills if you need me to." I trusted him completely. Why wouldn't I? He was my son, my only child, the person I loved most in the world. The idea that he would abuse that trust, that he would steal from me, was so foreign that even looking at the evidence, part of me still couldn't believe it. The kettle whistled, and I made my tea chamomile with honey, the same blend my mother Used to make when I was upset. I carried the mug to my small dining table and spread out all my financial papers, determined to understand exactly what had happened. As an accountant, I knew how to follow a paper trail. As a mother, I wasn't. Sure, I wanted to know where this one led. The first transfer was dated 6 months ago. $500 to something called venue deposit, Jens and Swolav. My heart sank a little further. 6 months ago, when Leo had come for dinner, he'd seemed distracted, checking his phone constantly when I'd asked if everything was okay. He'd just said work was stressful. He'd never mentioned a wedding. I traced through the transfers chronologically. Venue deposit, catering deposit, florist, photographer, DJ, wedding dress. The list went on and on, each expense more elaborate than the last. The final transfer, made just 2 weeks ago, was for $12,000 to something called honeymoon package, European romance tour. $12,000 for a honeymoon. I made a small sound, somewhere between a laugh and a sob. I hadn't taken a real vacation in 15 years. The last time I'd been out of Washington State was for my sister's funeral in Portland 3 years ago. My phone rang, jarring me from my thoughts. Rita's name flashed on the screen. My oldest friend, the one person who knew all my secrets and loved me anyway. I considered not answering, but Rita was persistent. If I didn't pick up, she'd probably show up at my door. Hello, Rita. Calm. Perfect timing. I just got back from yoga. And you know what that instructor said? She said we need to start living. Like we mean it. Isn't that perfect? So I'm calling to drag you out for dinner tonight. That new Greek place on Stoneway, the one with the cute waiter who reminds me of my second husband. Rita's energy was usually infectious, but today it felt overwhelming. I can't tonight, Rita. I'm dealing with something. What kind of something? And don't you dare say it's nothing. I can hear it in your voice. I closed my eyes. Rita and I had been friends for over 20 years, ever since we'd worked together at the same accounting firm. She was everything I wasn't: a bold, outspoken, willing to take risks. She'd been married 3 times, divorced 3 times, and claimed each one had taught her something valuable about herself. Right now, she was gleefully single and encouraging all her friends to embrace their independence. It's Leo, I said finally. What's he done now? And please tell me, it's not another one of those awkward dinners where he spends the whole time looking at his phone. He's getting married. Well, that's wonderful. When's the wedding? Please tell me you're not going to let him stick you at the table with all the distant relatives who only talk about their medical procedures. Rita, I found out by looking at my bank statements. He's been taking money from my account to pay for it. $47,000. The silence on the other end was so complete I thought we'd been disconnected. Finally, Rita spoke, her voice lower and more serious than I'd ever heard it. Come again? He's been using his access to my accounts to transfer money for wedding expenses, the venue, the catering, everything. I had no idea he was even engaged. That son of a Rita caught herself. Camilla, honey, are you sure? Maybe there's some explanation. I'm looking at 6 months of transfers, everything documented. There's even a honeymoon package for $12,000. Another pause. Where are you right now? At home. Stay there. I'm coming over. And calm. Don't you dare call him until I get there. We need to figure out how to handle this. She hung up before I could protest. I set the phone down and looked around my small apartment. Truly looked at it for the first time in months. The furniture was all second-hand, but well maintained. The decorations were minimal but carefully chosen. Everything was clean, organized, modest. I'd lived this way my entire adult life, always thinking about the future, always saving for Leo's next need or opportunity. I walked to my bedroom closet and pulled out the small jewelry box on the top shelf. Inside was my mother's pearl necklace. The only thing of real value I owned. She'd given it to me when I got married, and I'd planned to give it to Leo's wife someday. The pearls were lustrous and perfect, probably worth a few $1,000s. I'd never even considered selling them, even during the hardest times after Stefan died. But Leo had never hesitated to take $47,000 from my retirement fund. I heard Rita's car in the parking lot, her ancient Honda Civic with the loud muffler she refused to fix because it announced her arrival everywhere she went. Within minutes, she was at my door, her silver hair wild from the wind, her bright purple coat making her look like an exotic bird. "Show me," she said without preamble. Settling herself at my dining table, I spread out the bank statements, watching her face as she absorbed the information. Rita had been an accountant too. She knew how to read financial documents. Her expression grew grimmer with each page. "This is systematic," she said finally. "This isn't some desperate kid making a bad decision. This is planned theft. He's my son. He's a 34-year-old man who stole your retirement money." Rita's voice was sharp. "Camilla, you have to confront him, tonight. I don't know what to say. How do you ask your child why they betrayed you?" Rita reached across the table and took my hands. "Honey, I love you, but you've spent Leo's entire life making excuses for him. When he was rude to you, it was because he was grieving his father. When he didn't call for months, it was because he was busy with work. When he forgot your birthday last year, it was because he had a lot on his mind. At what point do you stop enabling him and start holding him accountable?" I wanted to argue, but deep down, I knew she was right. I'd been so afraid of losing Leo, of being alone, that I'd accepted behavior from him that I would never tolerate from anyone else. But this was different. This wasn't forgotten phone calls or missed dinners. This was theft. What if I confront him and he cuts me out of his life completely? What if you don't and he keeps stealing from you until there's nothing left? The truth of that hit me like a physical blow. If Leo could take $47,000 without telling me, what would stop him from taking more? My retirement fund wasn't limitless. I was 62 years old with modest savings and a small pension. I couldn't afford to lose any more. I looked at Rita, my dear friend who'd never let anyone take advantage of her, who'd walked away from marriages and jobs and friendships when they stopped serving her. She was brave in ways I'd never been. "Will you stay while I call him?" "Of course. But calm. You need to be prepared for the fact that he might not give you the answers you want to hear." I picked up my phone and scrolled to Leo's number. My hands were shaking as I pressed call. It rang 4 times before he answered. "Hey Mom, what's up?" "I'm actually in a meeting, so can I call you back later?" "Leo, I need to talk to you about my bank account." A pause. "What about it?" "I found the transfers. All of them. $47,000 for your wedding." The silence stretched so long, I thought he'd hung up. Finally, he sighed. "Mom, I can explain." "It's not what you think." "Then explain it to me now. I can't do this over the phone." "I'll come over after work." "Leo, did you take my money without asking?" Another pause. "We'll talk tonight." "Mom, I promise." The line went dead. I set the phone down and looked at Rita. "He's coming over tonight," I said. "Good, and Camilla. Whatever he says, whatever sob story he gives you, remember this. He stole from you. He violated your trust. Don't let him make you feel guilty for being upset about it." As Rita spoke, I thought about the herb garden on my balcony. How carefully I tended each plant, how proud I was when they flourished. I'd given Leo the same careful attention, the same unconditional love and support. But somewhere along the way, instead of growing into someone who would protect and cherish me the way I'd protected and cherished him, he'd grown into someone who would take from me without asking. Tonight, I would find out why. Leo arrived at 7:30, 40 minutes later than he'd promised. I watched from my window as he parked his sleek BMW, a car that cost more than I made in a year when I was starting out as an accountant. He sat in the car for several minutes before getting out, and I could see him checking his phone, probably texting Nadia or trying to figure out what to say to me. Rita had offered to stay, but I'd asked her to leave an hour earlier. This conversation needed to happen between Leo and me, without an audience. She'd hugged me tightly before going, whispering, "Remember what I said. Don't let him manipulate you." When Leo knocked, I took a deep breath before opening the door. My son stood there in his expensive suit, his dark hair perfectly styled, looking every inch the successful young professional he'd worked so hard to become. But there was something different about his expression or wariness that I'd never seen before, like a child caught doing something wrong. "Hi, Mom," he said, stepping inside and giving me a brief, awkward hug. "How are you feeling? Your arthritis okay?" I wanted to scream at the casual way he asked about my health, as if this were a normal visit, as if he hadn't stolen my retirement savings. Instead, I gestured toward the living room. Sit down, Leo, we need to talk. He perched on the edge of my sofa, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. I sat across from him in my reading chair, the bank statements spread on the coffee table between us like evidence at a trial. So, he began, his voice carefully controlled. You found the transfers, $47,000, Leo, 6 months of systematic withdrawals from my retirement account. I kept my voice steady, professional, the way I used to speak to clients. When I had to deliver bad news about their finances, I know how it looks, but I can explain everything. Then please do. Explain to me how taking my money without asking isn't stealing. Leo ran his hands through his hair, messing up the perfect styling. It's not stealing, Mom. I was always planning to pay it back. This was just a loan, a temporary thing until I could figure out the finances. A loan requires asking permission from the lender. I knew you'd say no. The bluntness of his admission was like a slap. So you decided to take it anyway. You don't understand the pressure I'm under. Leo stood up and started pacing, his agitation growing. Nadja comes from this wealthy family. Her father's a surgeon, her mother's a judge. When they throw parties, it's at country clubs and 5-star hotels. I couldn't propose to her and then ask her to settle for some cheap ceremony in a church basement. I stared at my son, this man I'd raised, trying to understand how we'd gotten to this point. So you stole from your mother instead. I didn't. Steal from you? God, Mom, why do you have to be so dramatic about everything? I was going to pay you back. With what money? You just spent $12,000 on a honeymoon. Leo stopped pacing and looked at me with something approaching contempt. You know what? Yes, I took the money. And yes, I spent it on my wedding. Because for once in my life, I wanted something nice. Do you have any idea what it's been like growing up as your son? Never having the nice clothes the other kids had, never going on fancy vacations, always being told we couldn't afford things while you squirreled away every penny. His words hit me like physical blows. I was saving for your future, for college, for opportunities or for what? So I could inherit your small, sad apartment and your collection of second-hand furniture. Mom, I love you, but I don't want your life. I want more than that. And you think that gives you the right to steal from me? I think it gives me the right to not apologize for wanting better. Leo's voice rose, and I saw flashes of the angry teenager he'd been after his father died, lashing out at the world and especially at me. You act like I'm this terrible person for taking money that's just sitting in your account anyway. What were you saving it for? You're retired, you live in this tiny apartment, you never go anywhere or do anything. At least I'm using the money to build a life. I felt something cold settle in my chest, a kind of clarity I hadn't experienced in years. This was who my son really was, someone who saw my careful financial planning as meaningless, who viewed my modest lifestyle as something to be ashamed of, who believed his wants trumped my security. Leo, I said quietly, when is the wedding? He looked surprised by the change in topic. Next Saturday, at the Four Seasons. Why? Was I invited? The question hung in the air between us. Leo's face went through several expressions: surprise, guilt, defiance for settling on something that looked almost like pity. Mom, it's a very upscale affair. Black tie, champagne reception, sit-down dinner for $200. It's not really your kind of thing. My kind of thing. You know what I mean. Nadia's family, my colleagues, everyone's going to be dressed to the nines. You'd feel out of place, so you decided I shouldn't come to my own son's wedding. It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. I stood up, feeling steadier than I had all day. You stole my money to pay for a wedding you don't think? I'm good enough to attend. That's not what I said. It's exactly what you said. You took $47,000 from me and didn't even plan to invite me to see where the money went. Leo sat back down heavily, his hands covering his face. This is such a mess. I never meant for it to happen like this. How did you mean for it to happen? I thought I'd get a bonus at work, or Nadia's dad would help out more, or something. I thought I'd be able to put the money back before you noticed. before I noticed that almost half my retirement savings were gone. You never check your accounts. You barely use your computer. I thought I had time to figure it out. I looked at this man who shared my eyes and my stubborn chin, who had my late husband's long fingers and quick smile, and felt like I was seeing him clearly for the first time in years. When had he become someone who would rationalize theft? When had he started seeing me as an obstacle to his happiness rather than the person who'd sacrificed everything to give him opportunities? Leo, do you remember when you were 16 and you wanted those expensive basketball shoes? The ones that cost more than our grocery budget for a month. He looked up, confused by another change in topic. What does that have to do with anything? Do you remember what I told you? You said we couldn't afford them. I said we couldn't afford them right now. But if you really wanted them, we could start saving. It would take for months, but we could do it together. I sat back down, leaning forward slightly. Do you remember what you said? Leo was quiet for a long moment. I said it wasn't worth it. That by the time we saved up, the style would be out of fashion. And what did I say to that? You said that's the difference between wanting something and needing something. That the thing's worth having are worth waiting for. I've been waiting my whole life, Leo, waiting for the right time to take that trip to Europe I always dreamed about, waiting for the right time to fix up this apartment, maybe get some new furniture. Waiting for the right time to maybe start dating again, to think about my own happiness instead of just yours. I've been waiting because I wanted to make sure you were settled and secure first. Tears were running down my cheeks now, but my voice remained steady. I trusted you with access to my accounts because I love you and because I thought you understood what that money represented. It's not just numbers on a statement, Leo. It's my security. It's my future. It's the difference between being independent and being dependent on. Well, on someone who would steal from me without asking. Leo was crying to now, ugly sobs that made his shoulders shake. Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I never thought about it like that. I just saw all that money sitting there, and the wedding expenses were piling up, and I panicked. You panicked for 6 months. I know how it sounds. I know I messed up, but I can fix this. I can pay you back. How? I'll get a loan, or sell the car. Or ask Nadia's family to help. You mean you'll borrow money to pay back the money you stole from me? What else can I do? I wiped my eyes and looked at the bank statement still spread across the coffee table. You can start by being honest with Nadia. Does she know where the money for her wedding came from? Leo's silence was answer enough. She has no idea, does she? This woman you love enough to marry. You're starting your relationship with a lie. I was going to tell her eventually. When? After you'd stolen enough from me to pay for your house down payment too. Mom, that's not fair. What's not fair is a 62-year-old woman discovering that her only child has been treating her like a bank account instead of a person. I stood up again, feeling suddenly exhausted. I think you should leave now. We're not done talking about this. Yes, we are, for tonight. Anyway, I walked to the door and opened it. Leo, I love you. I will always love you. But I need time to think about what happens next. He stood reluctantly, pausing in the doorway. Mom, please don't do anything rash. The wedding is next Saturday. Can we just get through that? And then we'll figure everything else out. The wedding I'm not invited to. I never said you weren't invited. You said it wasn't my kind of thing. Maybe I was wrong about that. I looked at my son, standing in my doorway in his expensive suit, still trying to manage the situation, still trying to find a way to have everything he wanted without facing the consequences of what he'd done. Good night, Leo. After he left, I sat in my quiet apartment and thought about the 16-year-old who'd wanted those basketball shoes. That boy had at least understood that wanting something didn't mean you were entitled to have it, somewhere. Along the way, I'd failed to teach him that some lines shouldn't be crossed, that some betrayals couldn't be undone with apologies and promises. I picked up the phone and called Rita. How did it go? She asked immediately. He's not sorry he did it. He's sorry he got caught. Did he invite you to the wedding? Only after I asked him directly. And only because he's afraid I'll do something to embarrass him. Are you going too? Go. I looked out my window at the lights of the city, at the life Leo had built for himself with my money. I don't know yet, but Rita, yeah. I'm tired of waiting for the right time to live my life. Good, Rita said firmly. It's about damn time. After we hung up, I went to my bedroom and opened the jewelry box again, taking out my mother's pearl necklace. The pearls caught the lamplight, luminous and perfect. My mother had worn them to her wedding, to important occasions, to moments. When she needed to feel strong and beautiful, tomorrow, I would decide what kind of woman I wanted to be for the rest of my life. Tonight, I would mourn the relationship with my son that I thought we had, and prepare to build something new, something based on truth instead of wishful thinking. I didn't sleep well that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Leo's face. When he'd said it wasn't my kind of thing, the mixture of embarrassment and condescension that told me everything I needed to know about how he really saw me. I kept thinking about that 16-year-old boy who'd wanted the basketball shoes, trying to pinpoint exactly when he'd stopped being grateful for what we had and started being ashamed of it. By morning, I'd made a decision. I called in sick too. My volunteer job at the literacy centre the first time, I'd missed a day in 3 years and spent the morning going through old photo albums and memory boxes I'd stored in my bedroom closet. I needed to understand how we'd gotten here, needed to trace the path that had led my loving son to become someone who would steal from me. The first box I opened and contained papers from Leo's childhood report cards, school programs, certificates, from various activities. I found his application essay for the University of Washington, written when he was 17. The prompt had been about overcoming adversity, and Leo had written about losing his father and watching me struggle to keep our family afloat. My mother worked double shifts and took on freelance clients to make sure I could still play sports and take music lessons, he'd written. She never complained, never made me feel guilty for the sacrifices she was making. She taught me that hard work and careful planning could overcome any obstacle. I want to be the kind of person who makes her proud. I sat on my bedroom floor, surrounded by boxes and photos, crying over the words my teenage son had written. That boy had understood sacrifice. That boy had been grateful. What had happened to him? I found my answer in the next box: pictures from Leo's college years and early career. There he was at company parties, always impeccably dressed, always networking. There he was with girlfriends who looked like they'd stepped out of magazines, at restaurants I couldn't afford, at events I'd never been invited to. In every picture, he looked successful, confident, like he belonged in that world of wealth and privilege. And in none of them was there any sign of the modest apartment where he'd grown up, or the mother who'd made it all possible. My phone rang around noon. Rita's name flashed on the screen. Please tell me you're not sitting in that apartment brooding, she said without preamble. I'm going through old photos. That's even worse. Get dressed. We're going shopping. Rita, I don't need anything. You need a dress. For what? For the wedding you're going to crash on Saturday. I almost dropped the phone. I never said I was going to the wedding. Honey, I've known you for 20 years. I can hear it in your voice. You're going to that wedding. And you're going to look absolutely stunning when you do it. Rita, I can't afford my treat. Consider it an early Christmas present. Besides, I've been dying for an excuse to go to Nordstrom. Meet me there in an hour. She hung up before I could protest further. I looked around at the photos scattered across my floor, a visual timeline of how I'd slowly made myself smaller and smaller in my son's life, until I'd disappeared entirely. Maybe Rita was right. Maybe it was time to make myself visible again. An hour later, I found myself in the dress department at Nordstrom, feeling overwhelmed by the sheer volume of options. Rita was in her element, pulling dresses from racks and holding them up against me. Something elegant, but not too flashy, she mused. Sophisticated enough for a four-seasons wedding, but with just a hint of don't mess with me. What about this? She held up an navy blue dress with a subtle shimmer to the fabric. It was beautiful, and probably cost more than I spent on groceries in a month. Rita, I can't let you buy this for me. You're not letting me do anything. I'm doing it because I want to. Because my best friend deserves to feel beautiful when she confronts her thieving son. Rita's expression grew serious. Come, when was the last time you bought yourself something nice? Something that wasn't practical or on sale or necessary. I thought about it, really thought about it. I can't remember, that's what I thought. Come on, let's try it on. In the dressing room, I stared at my reflection as Rita zipped up the dress. The woman looking back at me was someone I barely recognized. The dress fit perfectly, emphasizing curves I'd forgotten I had and making my eyes look brighter. With my hair styled and some makeup, I could easily fit in at an upscale wedding. You look gorgeous, Rita said softly. Absolutely gorgeous. I look like someone's mother trying to dress young. You look like a woman who knows her worth. Rita met my eyes in the mirror. Camilla, you've spent so many years making yourself small, making yourself invisible, that you've forgotten what you look like when you take up space. We bought the dress, along with shoes and a small clutch purse. Rita insisted on earrings to simple pearls that would complement my mother's necklace. As we walked through the mall afterward, I felt different somehow, like the act of buying something beautiful just for me had shifted something fundamental. Now, Rita said, steering me toward a coffee shop, we need to talk strategy. Strategy, you can't just show up at this wedding without a plan. What exactly are you hoping to accomplish? I stirred my latte thoughtfully. I want Leo to see me, really see me. Not as this invisible person whose money he can take, but as someone who matters. And then what? You want him to apologize? Cancel the wedding? Pay you back? I don't know. I just know I can't sit in my apartment this Saturday, knowing that my son is getting married with my money while pretending I don't exist. Rita nodded. Slowly, okay, but calm. You need to be prepared for this to go badly. Really badly. He might throw you out. He might never speak to you again. He might not speak to me again anyway. At least this way, I'll have spoken my truth. All right then. We crash a wedding that evening. I called my sister Helena in Portland. She was 5 years older than me, married to the same man for 40 years, with 3 grown children who still called her every Sunday. I'd always envied her that the way her family circled around her like satellites around the sun. Camilla. What a nice surprise. How are you, honey? I told her everything about the money, about Leo's betrayal, about my plan to attend the wedding. Helena listened without interrupting, a skill she'd perfected during her years as a high school counselor. Oh, sweetheart, she said when I finished. I'm so sorry. I know how much you love that boy. I still love him. That's what makes this so hard. You know, I remember when Leo was about 8, and he came to visit us for a week one summer. Tommy was being a brat about something, you know how boys that age can be, and Leo pulled him aside and said, my mom taught me that we don't take things that don't belong to us, even from family. He was so serious about it, so proud to be teaching my son something important. I closed my eyes, remembering that summer visit. Leo had been so excited to play big brother to his cousins, so eager to share the lessons I taught him. What happened to that boy, Helena? Life happened, success happened. Sometimes when people start moving up in the world, they forget where they came from. But that doesn't mean the lessons you taught him are gone forever. I'm scared, I admitted. I'm scared that if I go to this wedding, I'll lose him completely. Honey, from what you've told me, you've already lost him. At least this way, you'll lose him on your own terms. After we hung up, I sat in my reading chair with a cup of tea and thought about that 8-year-old boy lecturing his cousin about taking things that didn't belong to him. That boy had grown up to systematically steal from his own mother. But maybe, deep down, some part of him still remembered those lessons. Maybe seeing me at his wedding, really seeing me, would remind him who he used to be. I pulled out a piece of paper and started writing. If I was going to do this, if I was going to crash my son's wedding, I wanted to know exactly what I was going to say. The words needed to be perfect, needed to carry the weight of everything I'd felt and everything I'd lost. Leo, I wrote, I gave you life, and you took my future. I gave you love, and you gave me lies. But I'm still your mother, and you're still my son, and I refuse to disappear just because you find me inconvenient. I crossed it out and started again. Too angry, I tried several more versions, each one either too harsh or too weak, too dramatic or too understated. Finally, I set the pen down and decided to trust that when the moment came, I'd find the right words. The rest of the week passed in a strange, suspended state. I went through my normal routines: grocery shopping, library visits, coffee with Rita, but everything felt different, charged with anticipation. Several times, Leo called and left voicemails asking me to call him back, but I wasn't ready to talk to him yet. I needed Saturday to arrive first. I needed to see him in his expensive suit, in his expensive venue, surrounded by his expensive friends, celebrating his expensive wedding paid for with my money. Friday evening, I took a long bath and did my hair, painting my nails a soft pink that matched the interior of my mother's pearls. I laid out the navy dress, the new shoes, the small clutch. I felt like a soldier preparing for battle, except I wasn't sure what victory would look like. Rita called just before bedtime. You ready for tomorrow, warrior? I think so, Rita. Yeah, thank you. For the dress, for the pep talks, for believing. I'm braver than I actually am. Honey, you're the bravest person I know. You just forgot for a while. Tomorrow, you're going to remember that night I dreamed about my mother. She was wearing her pearl necklace, standing in the garden behind our house in Warsaw. I was 8 years old again, helping her plant tomatoes. Camilla, she said in Polish, her voice as clear as if she was standing next to me. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let someone face the consequences of their choices. I woke up Saturday morning knowing exactly what I had to do. Saturday morning dawned grey and drizzly. Typical Seattle weather that seemed appropriate for what I was about to do. I woke up early, my stomach churning with anxiety and something that might have been excitement. For the first time in months, maybe years, I had a purpose that was entirely my own. I took my time getting ready, treating it like a ritual. First, a long shower with the expensive body wash Rita had given me for my birthday, jasmine and sandalwood, scents that made me feel sophisticated. Then I carefully applied makeup, more than I usually wore, but not so much that I looked like I was trying too hard. I wanted to look like myself, just the best possible version. The navy dress fit even better than it had in the store, and when I clasped my mother's pearl necklace around my neck, I felt her presence like a blessing. In the mirror, I saw a woman who belonged anywhere she chose to be, including her son's wedding. My phone buzzed with a text from Rita. Send me a picture. I want to see my warrior goddess before she goes into battle. I awkwardly held the phone at arm's length and took a selfie, something I rarely did. When I looked at the result, I was surprised by what I saw. The woman in the photo looked confident, determined, beautiful. She looked like someone who wouldn't let anyone take advantage of her. I sent the picture to Rita, who immediately responded with a string of fire emojis and the message, Leo won't know what hit him. I'm so proud of you. The Four Seasons was downtown, about 20 minutes from my apartment by bus. I could have taken a taxi, but somehow the bus felt right, a reminder of who I really was, not someone who arrived at luxury hotels in private cars. I sat by the window and watched Seattle pass by, the familiar neighborhoods where I'd built my quiet life. When the hotel came into view, my courage almost failed me. It was massive and gleaming, with uniformed doormen and valet attendants, luxury. Cars pulled up to the entrance in a steady stream, disgorging elegantly dressed guests. I saw Audis and BMWs and Mercedes, cars that cost more than most people made in a year. I got off the bus a block away and walked slowly toward the hotel, my new shoes clicking confidently on the sidewalk. With each step, I felt more certain that I was doing the right thing. Whatever happened, I would no longer be invisible. The lobby was all marble and crystal, with massive flower arrangements that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Wedding guests clustered in elegant groups, the women in designer dresses and the men in expensive suits. I recognized a few faces from Leo's work parties I'd attended over the years. Back when he still invited me to things, I followed the signs. To the wedding venue, my heart pounding harder with each step. Outside the entrance to the ballroom, there was an elegant easel with a program that read The Wedding of Leonard Swalov and Nadja Jensen. Seeing it in black and white made everything feel real. My son was getting married in about an hour, with money he'd stolen from me, at a party I'd been deliberately excluded from. Excuse me, miss, are you here for the Swalov Jensen wedding? I turned to see a young woman in a hotel uniform holding a clipboard. She looked barely old enough to vote, with the kind of earnest smile that suggested she took her job very seriously. Yes, I said, I'm with the groom's family. Wonderful. Could I have your name? I have the seating chart here. Of course. Of course, there would be a seating chart. And of course my name wouldn't be on it. I felt my face flush with embarrassment and anger. I'm Camilla Swalov. Leo's mother, the young woman's finger traced down the list, her smile faltering slightly. I'm so sorry, but I don't see your name here. Let me just double-check. She flipped through several pages, looking increasingly uncomfortable. Are you sure you're on the guest list? I'm the groom's mother, I repeated, louder this time. The only parent he has left. Of course, there must be some mistake. Let me just call the wedding coordinator. She pulled out a radio and spoke into it quietly, walking a few steps away. While she was distracted, I slipped past her and into the ballroom. If I was going to be thrown out, it wouldn't be before I saw what my $47,000 had bought. The room was breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over dozens of round tables draped in ivory linens and topped with centerpieces of white roses and baby's breath. The ceremony space was set up at the far end of the room, with an archway of flowers that must have cost thousands of dollars alone. Everything was perfect, elegant, expensive. And none of it would have existed without my retirement money. I found an empty chair near the back and sat down, trying to blend in with the other guests who were taking their seats for the ceremony. Around me, I heard fragments of conversation, people discussing their jobs at tech companies, their recent vacations to Europe, their children's prestigious colleges. This was Leo's world, now, the world he'd bought with my savings. Camilla Swalov. I turned to see a woman about my age approaching, her face lighting up with recognition. It took me a moment to place her Mrs. Chen, Leo's high school math teacher. She'd been one of his favorites, always encouraging him to pursue advanced courses. Mrs. Chen, how lovely to see you. I can't believe it's been so long. You look wonderful. I'm so excited to see Leo get married. He was always such a special boy, so dedicated to his studies. You must be so proud. Yes, I managed. Very proud. I remember how hard you worked to support him after your husband passed. All those parent conferences you came to straight from your job, still in your work clothes. Leo used to tell me how his mother worked 2 jobs to make sure he could focus on school instead of worrying about money. The irony was so bitter I almost laughed. He had a good memory. You raised an exceptional young man. The way he talked about you, with such respect and gratitude. Well, you don't see that often anymore. Before I could respond, music began to play, and the guests turned their attention to the front of the room. The wedding party was taking their positions, young people I didn't recognize, all perfectly groomed and expensively dressed. Then the music swelled, and all eyes turned to the back of the room as Nadia appeared. She was beautiful, there was no denying that. Her dress was a confection of silk and lace that probably cost more than I'd spent on clothes in the past 5 years. Her blonde hair was styled in an elaborate updo, and her makeup was flawless. She looked like a princess, like someone who belonged in this world of luxury and privilege. But as she walked down the aisle, I found myself studying her face. She looked nervous, which was normal for a bride, but there was something else there. Tightness around her eyes that suggested anxiety deeper than pre-wedding jitters. I wondered if she suspected something about the money, or if she was simply overwhelmed by the magnitude of what Leo had planned. Then Leo appeared at the altar, and my breath caught. He looked so handsome in his tuxedo, so confident and successful. For a moment, I forgot about the money and just felt the pure, uncomplicated love of a mother watching her son at his wedding. This was the little boy I'd rocked to sleep, the teenager I'd helped with homework, the young man I'd cheered at graduation. But then I remembered where the money for his tuxedo had come from, where the money for everything had come from, and the love mixed with a grief so profound it almost knocked me over. The ceremony began, and I found myself listening to Father Declan, a soft-spoken man with kind eyes who spoke about love and commitment and building a life together. He talked about the importance of honesty in marriage, about being transparent with your partner, about your fears and dreams and mistakes. I wondered if he knew he was marrying to people who were starting their life together with a lie. When it came time for the vows, Leo spoke first. His voice was strong and clear as he promised to love Nadia, to support her dreams, to be her partner in all things. He talked about how she made him want to be a better man, how she inspired him to reach for things he'd never thought possible. "You've shown me that love isn't about what you can get from someone," he said, looking into Nadia's eyes. "It's about what you can give, what you can build together." The words were beautiful, romantic, and completely hollow. How could he talk about giving and building while wearing a tuxedo bought with stolen money, standing in a room paid for with his mother's retirement savings? Nadia's vows were shorter but seemed more heartfelt. She talked about feeling safe with Leo, about trusting him completely, about knowing that he would always be honest with her. The irony was devastating when Father Declan asked if anyone had any reason why these two should not be wed. The traditional pause felt eternal. I could speak now. I could stand up and tell everyone in this beautiful room exactly how this wedding was being funded. I could destroy everything with a few words, but I didn't, not yet. I wanted to see Leo's face when I chose my moment, wanted him to understand that I was here by choice, not by accident. The ceremony concluded with a traditional kiss, and the room erupted in applause. Leo and Nadia walked back down the aisle, together, beaming, and I felt a stab of genuine happiness for them despite everything. Whatever Leo had done, Nadia seemed like a sweet girl who deserved better than starting her marriage with lies. As the guests began moving to the cocktail area for photos and drinks, I stood up and smoothed my dress. Mrs. Chen had been swept away by friends, and I found myself alone in the crowd. I accepted a glass of champagne from a passing waiter and positioned myself where I could see Leo and Nadia greeting their guests. They looked so happy, so in love, surrounded by friends and family who were celebrating their joy. I watched Nadia's parents, a distinguished couple who clearly belonged in this world of wealth, embrace Leo warmly. I saw Leo's colleagues from work, the same people who'd gradually stopped inviting him to events where he might bring his working class mother. And then Leo saw me. He was mid-conversation with a group of his friends when his eyes swept the room and landed on me. The shock on his face was almost comical. His mouth actually fell open, and he went completely still. I raised my champagne glass slightly in acknowledgement, keeping my expression neutral. I watched him excuse himself from his friends and start walking toward me, his face cycling through emotions: shock, anger, embarrassment, fear. Nadia was still busy with other guests, unaware of the drama about to unfold. "Mom," Leo said when he reached me, his voice carefully controlled, but tight with tension. "What are you doing here?" "Attending my son's wedding," I replied calmly. "It's beautiful." "Leo, you must be very proud. How did you even know where it was?" The bank transfers were quite detailed. Jensen's Wolof Wedding Fund, for Seasons Hotel. It wasn't difficult to figure out. Leo glanced around nervously, clearly aware that several guests were watching our interaction with interest. "Mom, please, can we talk about this later? This isn't the time or place, isn't it?" This seems like exactly the time and place to discuss how my retirement money was spent. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Keep your voice down," Leo hissed, stepping closer to me. "There are people here, important people. My boss, Nadia's family are people who don't know where the money for this wedding came from." Leo's face went white. "Mom, I'm begging you, please. Don't do this here. We can talk tomorrow, work everything out. But please don't ruin my wedding." I looked at my son, this man I'd raised and loved and sacrificed for, and felt a curious sense of calm settle over me. "Leo, I spent $47,000 on this wedding. I think I deserve to enjoy it." The color drained from Leo's face as my words sank in. Around us, the elegant cocktail hour continued, guests mingling, laughing, sipping champagne, but I could see Leo's panic building as he realized the implications of my presence. "Mom, please," he whispered urgently, "let's go somewhere private to talk about this." "Why? Are you ashamed of me being here?" It's not about that. It's about timing. This is my wedding day, a wedding I paid for, but wasn't invited to. I watched him struggle with that logic, his eyes darting around the room to see if anyone was listening. A few guests were indeed glancing our way, probably wondering who the older woman in navy was that had the groom looking so distressed. "You can't just show up like this without warning," Leo said, his voice getting sharper despite his efforts to keep it low. "The way you withdrew my money without warning." Before Leo could respond, Nadia appeared at his side, radiant in her wedding dress, her smile faltering slightly when she saw the tension between us. "Leo, is everything okay?" Her eyes moved to me with curious politeness. "I don't think we've been introduced." The moment stretched out painfully. I could see Leo wrestling with how to handle this, his jaw working as he tried to find words. Finally, I stepped forward. "Hello, Nadia, I'm Camilla Swalov." Leo's mother. The confusion on Nadia's face was immediate and complete. "Leo's mother. But I thought ... Leo, you said your mother couldn't make it to the wedding." "I said she probably wouldn't come," Leo corrected quickly, but his voice sounded strained. "Mom, this is Nadia. Nadia, this is my mother." Nadia's smile was warm, but puzzled as she extended her hand to me. "It's so wonderful to finally meet you properly. Leo talks about you all the time." "I'm sorry there was confusion about the invitation." "There was no confusion," I said gently, taking her hand. "I wasn't invited." The silence that followed was deafening. Nadia's eyes moved between Leo and me, trying to process what I'd just said. Around us, the party continued, but I felt like we were in a bubble of tension that might burst at any moment. "I don't understand," Nadia said slowly. "Leo, why wasn't your mother invited to our wedding?" "It's complicated," Leo started, but I cut him off. "It's quite simple, actually." Leo felt this wasn't my kind of thing, to upscale for someone like me. Nadia's face went through several expressions: confusion, hurt, anger. "Leo, how could you not invite your own mother? She's your only family." "Nadia, can we please discuss this later?" Leo's voice was tight with embarrassment and rising anger. "This is neither the time nor the place for a family drama." "Family drama," I repeated, feeling my own anger spark. "Is that what you call stealing from your mother? Stealing?" Nadia's voice rose slightly, causing several nearby guests to turn and look. "What's she talking about?" Leo grabbed Nadia's arm, trying to steer her away. "Let's go talk privately." "No." Nadia pulled free, her voice getting stronger. "I want to know what she means about stealing." Right now, I looked at this young woman, so beautiful in her expensive dress, so clearly in love with my son, and felt a stab of sympathy. She had no idea that her fairy tale wedding was built on lies and theft. "Nadia," I said gently, "did Leo ever mention how he was paying for all this? The venue, the catering, your dress, the honeymoon?" "He said he'd been saving up, and that he got a bonus at work, and that my parents helped with some of it. ... Her voice trailed off as she looked at Leo, whose face had gone ashen. Leo, what is she talking about?" The moment hung in the air like a sword about to fall. I could see Leo calculating, trying to find a way out, a story that would salvage the situation, but there was no way out, not anymore. "I had to borrow some money from Mom," he said finally, his voice barely audible. "Borrow?" I couldn't keep the bitter laugh out of my voice. "Is that what you call taking $47,000 from my retirement account without asking?" The champagne glass slipped from Nadia's hand, shattering on the marble floor. The sound seemed to echo through the room, and suddenly we had the attention of everyone nearby. $47,000. Nadia's voice was a whisper. "Leo, tell me she's lying. Tell me you didn't steal money from your mother to pay for our wedding." "It wasn't stealing," Leo said desperately. "I was going to pay it back. I am going to pay it back." "Mom, tell her. Tell her I promised to pay you back. After you got caught," I said quietly. Nadia was staring at Leo like she'd never seen him before. "You stole from your mother. You stole from your mother to pay for our wedding. And you didn't tell me." "Nadia, please, let me explain." "Explain what?" "That you're a liar. That you're a thief. That you let me plan this whole wedding thinking we were paying for it honestly." The circle of interested guests was growing larger. I could see people whispering, phones being discreetly pulled out to record what was clearly becoming a scene. Leo noticed too, his face cycling between panic and rage. "This is exactly what I was afraid would happen," he said to me, his voice low and vicious. This is why I didn't invite you, because I knew you'd find a way to ruin everything. The cruelty of it hit me like a slap. After everything, after raising him alone, after sacrificing my dreams for his future, after giving him access to my money because I trusted him, he was making me the villain. I ruined everything, I asked, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. I'm not the one who stole money. I'm not the one who lied to his fiancée. I'm not the one who excluded his mother from his wedding. You don't belong here. Leah snapped, losing control completely. Look around, Mom. Look at this place. Look at these people. This isn't your world. You drive a 15-year-old car and live in a rental apartment and shop at thrift stores. I couldn't bring you here and pretend you fit in. The words hung in the air like poison. Around us, the guests had gone completely silent, watching this family implosion with the horrified fascination people have for car accidents. Leo, Nadia's voice was barely audible, but it cut through the tension like a knife. How dare you? How dare you speak to your mother that way? Nadia, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. She turned to me, tears streaming down her face, her expensive makeup ruined. Mrs. Swallow, I am so sorry. I had no idea. If I had known where the money came from, I never would have let him spend it. I know, sweetheart, I said gently. You seem like a lovely girl. You deserve better than this. Nadia looked around at the beautiful reception, at the guests who were all staring at her with pity and curiosity, at the wedding she'd dreamed of that was now tainted with lies. I can't do this, she whispered. I can't start my marriage like this, Nadia. Wait. Leo reached for her, but she stepped back. Don't touch me. Don't you dare touch me right now. Father Declan appeared at our little circle, his kind face creased with concern. Is everything all right here? Can I help with anything? Father, Nadia said, her voice getting stronger, I need to ask you something. If a marriage is started with lies, with deception, is it valid in God's eyes? The priest looked confused, glancing between the three of us. Well, marriage should be built on truth and trust, then this marriage can happen. Nadia's voice was clear now, carrying across the silent room. I won't marry someone who would steal from his own mother and lie to me about it. Nadia, please. Leo was begging now. We can work this out. I'll pay the money back. I'll do whatever you want. Just please don't do this here, in front of everyone. Where else should I do it, Leo? In private, so you can manipulate me into changing my mind. So you can convince me that somehow this is all okay. Nadia started pulling rings off. Her finger, her engagement ring, her wedding band that had been blessed just an hour ago. I won't be married to someone I can't trust. She pressed the rings into Leo's hand and looked around the room at all the shocked faces. I'm sorry, everyone. There won't be a reception tonight. The wedding is off. The silence was absolute. 200 guests stood frozen, watching a bride walk away from her own wedding. I felt a strange mix of pride and heartbreak. Pride that this young woman had the courage to stand up for what was right. Heartbreak that my son had become someone who made such courage necessary. Leo stood there holding the rings, his face a mask of rage and humiliation. When he turned to me, I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before, not just anger, but genuine hatred. Are you happy now? He asked, his voice shaking. You got what you wanted. You destroyed my wedding. You ruined my life. You took away the only good thing I had. Leo, no, I'm done. I'm done with your guilt trips. I'm done with your disappointment. I'm done with you making me feel bad for wanting more than the pathetic life you settled for. His voice was getting louder, more vicious. You want to know why I didn't invite you? Because you're embarrassing. Because you're small and scared, and you've never done anything with your life except hold me back. The words hit me like physical blows, but strangely, they also brought clarity. This was who my son really was underneath all the success, and polished someone who would blame others for the consequences of his own choices. Someone who would try to tear down the person who loved him most, rather than face his own failures. You are right, I said quietly, and Leo looked surprised. I am small and scared. I've spent my whole life making myself smaller so that you could be bigger. I've been afraid to take up space, afraid to demand what I deserve, afraid to expect basic respect from my own son. I looked around the room at all the guests, at the elaborate decorations paid for with my money, at the ruins of what should have been a celebration. But I'm not afraid anymore. The silence in the ballroom was deafening after Nadia's departure. 200 guests stood frozen, unsure whether to leave or stay. Their shocked faces turned toward Leo and me like we were actors in a play they couldn't quite believe they were watching. I could hear my heart beating in my ears, feel the weight of every eye in the room. Leo stood there clutching Nadia's rings, his expensive tuxedo suddenly looking like a costume, his face cycling between rage and something that might have been panic. For a moment, he looked exactly like the 12-year-old boy who'd raged at the world after his father died, striking out at everything and everyone because the pain was too big to contain. "Look what you've done," he said, his voice barely controlled. "Look what you've done to me." Father Declan stepped forward, his gentle presence somehow calming in the chaos. "Perhaps we should move this conversation somewhere more private," he suggested softly. No, the word came out stronger than I'd intended. No more private conversations, no more hiding. No more making myself invisible so Leo doesn't have to be embarrassed by his mother. I turned to face the crowd of guests, my hands shaking but my voice steady. These people, Leo's colleagues, Nadia's family and friends, the social circle he'd worked so hard to impress, deserved to know the truth. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice carrying clearly through the silent room, "I'm Camilla Swalov, Leo's mother, the mother he was too ashamed to invite to his own wedding." A murmur went through the crowd. I saw Nadia's parents near the front, their faces tight with concern and confusion. Behind them, I recognized some of Leo's co-workers, people who'd shaken my hand politely at company parties years ago, when Leo still acknowledged my existence. "I want you all to know that this beautiful wedding, this elegant reception, was paid for with money stolen from my retirement account. $47,000 that I saved working as an accountant for 35 years. Money I put aside so I wouldn't be a burden to anyone in my old age." The murmur grew louder. Phones were being pulled out now, not discreetly anymore. This was going to be all over social media within hours. "Mom, stop." Leo's voice was desperate. "Please stop talking." "I've been quiet for too long," I continued, ignoring him. "I've been invisible for too long. I've spent years making excuses for my son's behavior, telling myself that his success was worth any sacrifice. But stealing from your mother and then excluding her from your wedding because she's not sophisticated enough for your new life, that's not success. That's cruelty, Mrs. Swalov." Nadia's father stepped forward, his face grave. He was a distinguished man in his 60s, with the kind of natural authority that comes from years of making life and death decisions as a surgeon. "I'm Dr. Jensen, Nadia's father. I want you to know that my wife and I had no idea about any of this. If we had known ... double quotes, I know you didn't," I said gently. "Your daughter is a lovely girl with strong moral principles. She gets that from you ... double quotes." Dr. Jensen looked at Leo with something approaching disgust. "Young man, I don't know how you thought you could start a marriage built on lies and theft, but I'm grateful my daughter had the courage to walk away." "Dr. Jensen, please, if you'd just let me explain," Leo started, but the older man held up a hand. "There's nothing to explain. You stole from your mother, you lied to my daughter. You excluded the woman who raised you from your wedding because you were ashamed of her. What kind of man does that?" The question hung in the air, and I saw Leo's face crumple slightly as the full weight of what he'd done seemed to hit him. For a moment, I thought I saw a glimpse of the boy I'd raised, the one who'd once lectured his cousin about not taking things that didn't belong to him. But then his expression hardened again, and when he spoke, his voice was cold with resentment. The kind of man who was tired of being held back by someone else's limitations. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. I felt like he'd slapped me in front of all these people, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. But then I felt something else, a kind of liberation. For years, I'd been afraid of losing Leo, afraid of pushing him away with my needs or expectations. But there was nothing left to lose now. He'd already pushed me away, already decided I wasn't worth basic respect or honesty. "You know what, Leo?" I said, my voice getting stronger. "You're right, I have been limited. I've been limited by my love for you, by my willingness to sacrifice everything for your happiness. I've been limited by my fear of disappointing you, of not being good enough for the life you wanted to build. I looked around the room at the elaborate decorations, the crystal and flowers and fine linens that had caused so much of my future security. But I'm not limited anymore. I'm 62 years old, and I've spent the last 30 years of my life making myself smaller so you could be bigger. I've deferred my dreams, postponed my happiness, lived quietly and modestly so that you could have every opportunity. And you repaid that sacrifice by stealing from me and then telling everyone it's because I'm not good enough for your new life. My voice was rising now, and I could feel decades of suppressed frustration and hurt pouring out of me. Well, I'm good enough. I worked 2 jobs to keep you in sports and music lessons when your father died. I took on extra clients to pay for your college when the scholarship didn't cover everything. I lived in a studio apartment for 5 years, so you could have the bigger bedroom when you came home for breaks. I've been good enough for 30 years, Leo. The question is whether you're good enough for me. The room was so quiet I could hear the clink of ice in abandoned cocktail glasses. I saw Mrs. Chen near the back, tears streaming down her face. I saw Leo's boss, a woman I'd met several times, looking at him with open dismay. And you know what? The really sad part is, I continued, feeling tears start to flow down my own cheeks. I came here tonight, not to ruin your wedding, but to be seen, to be acknowledged. To stand in this beautiful room that I paid for and be recognized as someone who matters. I didn't come here to destroy anything. I came here to exist. I pulled my mother's pearl necklace from under my dress, letting it catch the light from the crystal chandeliers. This necklace belonged to my mother. She wore it when she married my father in Warsaw in 1943, in the middle of a war, with nothing but love and hope for the future. She gave it to me when I married your father, and I plan to give it to your wife someday, but I realize now that the woman who deserves to wear these pearls is someone who understands their value, not their monetary value, but what they represent. Love, sacrifice, family, legacy. I unclasped the necklace and held it up for everyone to see. Nadja deserves to wear these pearls. She had the courage to walk away from a lie, even when it cost her everything she'd dreamed of. That's the kind of woman who honors what these pearls represent. I walked through the crowd toward where I'd seen Nadja's parents standing. Dr. Jensen and his wife watched me approach, their faces filled with sympathy and something that might have been respect. Would you please give this to Nadja? I asked, pressing the necklace into Mrs. Jensen's hands. Tell her it comes with love from someone who admires her courage. Mrs. Jensen took the pearls with tears in her eyes. She's in the bridal suite. She said softly, would you like to see her? I think she'd like to meet you properly. I glanced back at Leo, who was standing alone in the middle of the abandoned wedding reception, his face a mask of humiliation and rage. Part of me, the mother part that would always love him, wanted to go to him, to try to fix this somehow. But I was done fixing things for Leo. It was time for him to face the consequences of his choices. Yes, I said to Mrs. Jensen, I'd like that very much. As we walked toward the exit, I heard Father Declan's voice behind us, gentle but firm. Son, he was saying to Leo, sometimes the most loving thing someone can do is let you see yourself clearly. Your mother just gave you a gift. Though you may not recognize it yet. I didn't turn around to see Leo's response. For the first time in 30 years, what he thought about my choices was not my primary concern. Mrs. Jensen led me through the hotel corridors to the bridal suite, a beautiful room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Elliott Bay. Nadja was sitting on the edge of the bed, still in her wedding dress, but with her veil removed and her hair coming undone. She looked up when we entered, her face streaked with tears, but somehow more beautiful than she'd looked at the altar. Nadja, darling, Mrs. Jensen said gently, Mrs. Swallow wanted to see you. Nadja stood up immediately, her expression uncertain. Mrs. Swallow, I'm so sorry about what happened down there. I had no idea. Please, I said, sitting down in the chair across from her. Call me Camilla. And you have nothing to apologize for. You did exactly the right thing. I destroyed my own wedding. You saved yourself from a marriage built on lies. That took tremendous courage. Nadja sat back down, pulling her elaborate skirt around her. I feel so stupid. How did I not know? How did I not see that he was lying to me about something so important? Because you trusted someone you loved. That's not stupid, that's human. Your son hates me now. I thought about that, about the Leo I'd seen downstairs, the man who chose in anger and blame over accountability and growth. Nadia, can I tell you something about my son that might help you understand why you made the right choice? She nodded, wiping her eyes with a tissue. When Leo was 8 years old, he found a wallet in the grocery store parking lot. It had $60 in it, more money than we usually had for fun things. Leo wanted to keep it, said the person who lost it was careless and didn't deserve to get it back. But I made him turn it into customer service. He was angry about it for weeks, couldn't understand why we had to give away money we could have used. I paused, remembering that day, remembering the argument we'd had in the car. I thought I'd taught him something important about integrity. But looking back, I think what he learned was that his mother would always make him do the hard thing, the right thing, even when it cost him something he wanted. And somewhere along the way, he started resenting me for that. Nadia was listening intently, her hands folded in her lap. The man you almost married today is someone who learned to work around integrity instead of developing it. He found ways to get what he wanted without doing the hard work of earning it honestly. That's why he could steal from me and then blame me for catching him. That's why he could lie to you and then get angry when you wouldn't accept the lie. But he said he loves me. I believe he does, in his way. But Leo loves himself more than he loves anyone else, and that's not the foundation for a marriage. Nadia was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the city lights beginning to twinkle in the early evening darkness. What am I going to do now? She asked finally. Everyone I know was at that wedding. My dress, the photographer, the honeymoon, everything's already paid for. With my money, I said gently. But that's not your fault, and it's not your problem to solve. I reached into my purse and pulled out the small jewelry box Mrs. Jensen had given me. This belonged to my mother, and her mother before that. It's not worth much money, but it's worth something more important. It represents women who had the courage to build lives based on truth, even when the truth was difficult. I opened the box to reveal the pearl necklace, luminous in the soft light of the hotel room. I'd like you to have it. I can't take this. It should go to family. You showed more integrity in one moment today than my son has shown in years. That makes you more family to me than blood does. Nadia took the necklace with trembling hands, holding it up to catch the light. It's beautiful. My mother wore it through a war, through losing everything she'd known and starting over in a foreign country. I wore it when I married Leo's father, when I was young and hopeful and thought love could overcome anything. You should wear it as a reminder that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is have the courage to walk away. As I helped her clasp the necklace around her neck, I felt a sense of completion I hadn't expected. For years, I'd imagined giving these pearls to Leo's wife in a moment of joy and celebration. Instead, I was giving them to a woman who'd had the strength to choose truth over comfort, integrity over security. Thank you, Nadia whispered. Not just for the necklace, but for showing me what real love looks like, the way you stood up to Leo tonight, the way you spoke your truth, even when it was painful. That's the kind of person I want to be. You already are that person, I said. You proved it today. As I prepared to leave, Nadia caught my hand. Camilla, what happens now? Between you and Leo. I thought about my son, probably still standing in that ballroom, surrounded by the ruins of his carefully planned life, facing the consequences of his choices for maybe the first time. I don't know, I said honestly. But for the first time in 30 years, what happens next is going to be up to him. I left Nadia in the bridal suite and walked back through the hotel corridors, my heels clicking on the marble floors with a confidence I hadn't felt in years. The sounds from the ballroom had changed. Instead of party music and celebration, I heard the low murmur of confused conversations and the scraping of chairs as guests prepared to leave. When I reached the ballroom entrance, I saw that most people had indeed begun to gather their things. Hotel staff were discreetly clearing champagne glasses and catering stations, trying to restore order to what should have been a reception, but had become something else entirely. The elaborate floral arrangements looked almost mocking now, beautiful decorations for a party that would never happen. Leo was still there, standing near the altar where he'd gotten married less than 2 hours ago, talking intensely with his best man and a few other friends. They formed a tight circle around him, their voices low, but their body language defensive. When Leo saw me approaching, he said something to his friends and they melted away, leaving us alone in the space where his wedding had fallen apart. "I hope you're satisfied," he said, his voice hollow but still edged with anger. "You got what you wanted." What I wanted was to be included in my son's life. What I wanted was honesty and respect. What I wanted was not to be stolen from, and instead you destroyed everything. I looked around the ballroom, at the abandoned tables and wilting flowers, at the dance floor that would never see a first dance between bride and groom. I didn't destroy anything, Leo. I just refused to pretend anymore. Pretend what? Pretend that what you did was okay. Pretend that love means accepting abuse. Pretend that being your mother means disappearing whenever my existence becomes inconvenient. For you, Leo ran his hands through his hair, messing up the styling that had been perfect for his wedding photos. You don't understand the pressure I was under. Nadia's family has money, real money. Her father drives a Tesla. Her mother has a house in the San Juan Islands. When I proposed to her, I couldn't exactly suggest we have the wedding at some community center with a potluck dinner, so you stole from me instead. I borrowed from you. There's a difference. No, Leo, there isn't. Not when you don't ask permission first. Not when you have no realistic plan to pay it back. Not when you exclude the person you're stealing from because you're ashamed of them. I sat down in one of the abandoned chairs, suddenly feeling the weight of the evening, the emotional toll of finally speaking truths I'd kept buried for years. "Do you remember when you were in college and you called me crying because you'd failed your economics midterm? You were so upset, convinced you were going to flunk out, that all my sacrifices would be for nothing." Leo's expression softened slightly. "At the memory, you drove up that night, even though it was snowing and you hate driving in snow. I brought you soup and sat with you while you studied for the makeup exam. And do you remember what I told you? You said failure wasn't falling down, it was staying down. I also said that character isn't what you do when everything is going well. Character is what you do when you're tested, when you're under pressure. When the easy choice and the right choice are different things." Leo was quiet, staring at the floor. "You failed that test, Leo, when you were under pressure to impress Nadia's family. When you were faced with choosing between honesty and image, you chose to steal from your mother rather than have a modest wedding you could afford. It wasn't supposed to be permanent. It was supposed to be secret. That's what makes it theft." Father Declan appeared beside us, his presence somehow calming even in the midst of all this emotional wreckage. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to check on both of you before I left, Father," Leo said, his voice cracking slightly. "What am I supposed to do now? My wife left me. My career is probably ruined when this gets out. My mother hates me. I don't hate you," I said quietly. "I'm disappointed in you. I'm hurt by you. But I don't hate you." Father Declan sat down across from us, his kind eyes moving between Leo and me. "Leo, can I ask you something? When you were standing at that altar, saying your vows to Nadia, what? Were you feeling happy, proud, like I was finally becoming the man I'd always wanted to be? And what kind of man was that?" Leo thought for a moment. "Successful, respected, someone who belonged in rooms like this, someone who belonged," Father Declan repeated thoughtfully. "Tell me, when you were growing up, did you feel like you belonged?" I watched Leo's face as he considered the question, saw him thinking back to those years after his father died when we'd struggled to make ends meet. "Sometimes," he said finally. "When it was just me and Mom at home, yeah, but at school, with other kids whose families had more money. Not always. And you thought that having money, having success, would make you belong. Wouldn't it?" Father Declan smiled sadly. "Leo, you can't buy belonging. You can't steal it either. Belonging comes from being authentic, from being honest about who you are and where you come from. The moment you started being ashamed of your mother, ashamed of your history, you stopped belonging anywhere because you stopped being yourself." I felt tears threatening again as the priest's words hit home. "I should have taught him that better," I said. "I should have made him proud of where he came from instead of hungry for something different." Mom, no, Leo said, and for the first time all evening, his voice held genuine emotion instead of anger or defensiveness. You did teach me that. I just ... I lost my way. The question now, Father Declan said gently, is what you're going to do with this revelation. How are you going to rebuild your life based on truth instead of image? Leo looked around the ballroom, at the evidence of his expensive mistake, at the mother he'd betrayed sitting across from him. I don't know where to start. You start by telling the truth, I said, to yourself, to me, to Nadia if she listened, to everyone you've lied to. What if it's too late? What if I've ruined everything beyond repair? I thought about Nadia in the bridal suite, still in her wedding dress, but wearing my mother's pearls, choosing courage over comfort. I thought about the strength it had taken her to walk away from everything she'd planned for her future. Leo, do you really love Nadia? Yes, more than anything. Then prove it. Show her that you can become the kind of man who deserves her love. Start paying me back, even if it takes years. Go to therapy and figure out why you thought stealing and lying were acceptable. Take responsibility for what you've done without blaming anyone else. And if I do all that, will she take me back? I don't know. But more importantly, will you be able to live with yourself if you don't? Leo was quiet for a long time, staring at his hands. When he finally spoke, his voice was small, like a child's. Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. You didn't deserve any of this. The apology I'd been waiting for, needing for months, finally came. But strangely, it felt less important than I'd expected. The drama of the evening had shown me something crucial. I didn't need Leo's apology to know my worth. I didn't need his acknowledgement to validate my sacrifices. I was valuable with or without his recognition. I know you're sorry, I said. But Leo, sorry isn't enough anymore. Sorry is just words. I need to see change. What kind of change? I need you to get help. Real help from a professional who can help you understand why you thought this was acceptable. I need you to take full responsibility for what you've done, publicly if necessary. And I need you to understand that our relationship is going to be different from now on. Different how? I took a deep breath, feeling like I was stepping off a cliff into unknown territory. I'm not going to be the mother who's grateful for scraps of attention anymore. I'm not going to be the mother who makes excuses for your behavior or enables your selfishness. If you want a relationship with me, it's going to be based on mutual respect and honesty. What if I can't be that person? The question hung in the air between us, heavy with possibility and loss. I thought about the 8-year-old boy who'd wanted to keep that lost wallet, who'd argued with me about doing the right thing. Maybe that moment had been more telling than I'd realized. Maybe some people were always going to choose the easy path over the right one. Then you'll have to live with the consequences of that choice, I said finally. But Leo, I believe you can be that person. I have to believe it, because the alternative is accepting that I failed completely as a mother. You didn't fail, Mom. I did. Father Declan stood up, his mission apparently complete. I'll leave you to continue this conversation. But Leo, remember, redemption is always possible, but it requires genuine change, not just good intentions. After he left, Leo and I sat in the empty ballroom for a while longer, surrounded by the ruins of his carefully planned life. Hotel staff moved around us discreetly, beginning the massive job of cleaning up a reception that never happened. What happens now? Leo asked finally. Now you go home and figure out how to rebuild your life based on truth instead of lies. You start making a plan to pay me back, even if it takes years. You call Nadia and tell her you understand why she left and that you don't expect her to take you back, but that you're committed to becoming someone worthy of her love. And what about us? I looked at my son, this man I'd raised and loved and sacrificed for, who'd broken my heart and stolen my money and then blamed me for the consequences. Despite everything, I still saw glimpses of the boy I'd taught to ride a bike, the teenager I'd helped with college applications, the young man who'd once promised to take care of me when I got old. I don't know yet. But Leo, I'm not disappearing from your life just because acknowledging me is inconvenient. I exist whether you're ashamed of me or not. I matter whether you respect me or not. From now on, you're going to have to decide what kind of relationship you want with me. Knowing that I'm not going to settle for being treated as less than I'm worth, I want to try. To be better, I mean, to be the son you deserve, then try. But Leo, do it for yourself, not for me. Because the man who stole from his mother and lied to his fiancée needs to change for his own sake, not just to make other people happy. As we prepared to leave the ballroom, Leo stopped and looked back at the altar where he'd gotten married. Just hours ago, I really thought this was going to be the best day of my life, he said quietly. Maybe it still can be, I replied. Maybe this is the day you stopped living a lie and started building something real. Outside the hotel, we stood awkwardly in the evening air. Leo's BMW was waiting with the valet. My bus stop was 2 blocks away. For a moment, we both seemed unsure how to end this evening, how to transition from the dramatic confrontation to whatever came next. Mom, Leo said finally, can I drive you home? I thought about it, about sitting in his expensive car, about the awkward conversation we'd have during the 20-minute drive to my apartment. Part of me wanted to accept, wanted to take this small olive branch he was offering, but I also knew that nothing real would change if we immediately went back to our old patterns, if I made things easy for him again. Thank you, but I'll take the bus, I said. I like the bus. It gives me time to think, Leo nodded, understanding somehow that this wasn't just about transportation. I'll call you tomorrow, he said. To start figuring out the money situation, okay? But Leo, don't call me to talk about what happened tonight until you've had some time to really think about it. I don't want another conversation where you try to justify what you did or blame me for the consequences. I understand. As I walked toward the bus stop, I heard Leo's car start behind me. I didn't turn around to watch him drive away. Instead, I kept my eyes focused forward, toward whatever came next. The bus ride home gave me time to process everything that had happened. I sat by the window, watching Seattle pass by in the darkness, feeling strangely empty and full at the same time. Empty of the illusions I'd carried about my relationship with Leo, but full of something I hadn't felt in years: self-respect. When I got home to my small apartment, it felt different somehow. The modest furniture I'd apologized for, the simple decorations Leo had found embarrassing, the life I'd built carefully and economically, none of it looked small anymore. It looked like home, like a place where someone lived with intention and dignity. I made myself a cup of tea and sat in my reading chair, still wearing the navy dress and the new shoes, still feeling like the woman who'd walked into that hotel with purpose. My phone had been buzzing with missed calls and text messages throughout the evening. Rita, my sister Helena, even Mrs. Chen from the wedding. But I wasn't ready to talk about what had happened. I needed time to understand it myself first. The apartment was quiet except for the familiar sounds of the building settling and the distant hum of traffic. I thought about Leo, probably in his expensive condo right now, trying to figure out how to explain to his friends and colleagues what had happened. I thought about Nadia, hopefully surrounded by family who loved her enough to support her difficult choice. I thought about the $47,000 that was gone, money I'd probably never see again, but somehow didn't resent anymore. The strangest thing was that I felt free. For the first time in 30 years, I wasn't worried about Leo's opinion of me, wasn't planning my choices around his needs or reactions. I was just myself, sitting in my own space, accountable to no one but me. My phone rang. Rita's name flashed on the screen, and this time I answered. Jesus Christ, Camilla, I've been calling you for hours. Are you okay? Please tell me you didn't do anything crazy at that wedding. I laughed, a real laugh that surprised me with its lightness. Define crazy. Oh God, what did you do? I told her everything, walking into the reception, confronting Leo, meeting Nadia, watching the wedding fall apart, the terrible things Leo had said, giving away my mother's pearls. Rita listened without interrupting, occasionally making small sounds of shock or approval. So the wedding is off? She asked when I finished. Completely off. Nadia walked away. Good for her. And good for you, standing up to that spoiled brat, Rita. He's still my son. He's a 34-year-old man who stole from his mother and blamed her for catching him. At some point, You have to stop making excuses for him based on DNA. I knew she was right, but it would take time for my heart to catch up with my head. I gave Nadja my mother's pearls, the ones you were saving for Leo's wife. She's Leo's wife, or was, for about an hour. But more than that, she's someone who had the courage to choose integrity over security. She deserves to wear them. Rita was quiet for a moment. You know what, honey, I'm proud of you, really proud. You could have stayed home tonight, could have let Leo get away with it, could have kept pretending everything was fine. Instead, you showed up and spoke your truth, even when it was hard. I'm not sure I had a choice. I couldn't live with myself if I just let it go. There's always a choice. You chose courage over comfort, and that's not easy for anyone, especially someone who's spent years avoiding conflict. After we hung up, I finally changed out of the dress and shoes, hanging them carefully in my closet. I might never have another occasion to wear such an elegant outfit, but I wanted to keep it as a reminder of the night I stopped being invisible. Over the next few days, the story of what happened at the wedding spread through Leo's social circles and beyond. Someone had recorded part of the confrontation and posted it online, where it quickly went viral with captions like "Savage mom crashes son's wedding after he steals her money, and this is why you don't mess with Polish mothers." I was mortified. At first, seeing myself on strangers' phones, becoming a meme. But then I started reading the comments, and many of them were surprisingly supportive. People shared their own stories of family betrayal, of children who'd taken advantage of parents' love, of the difficulty of setting boundaries with family members. I wasn't alone in this experience, which was somehow comforting. Leo called on Tuesday, as promised. His voice was subdued, different from the angry defensiveness he'd shown at the wedding. "Mom, I wanted to let you know I've made an appointment with a therapist. Someone who specializes in family relationships and financial boundaries." "That's good, Leo." I also talked to HR at work about taking a leave of absence. I can't focus on anything right now, and honestly, everyone's seen the video. I need time to figure things out. I felt a stab of sympathy for him despite everything, whatever his faults. Leo had worked hard to build his career, and now it was probably in ruins because of choices he'd made in desperation and pride. And I've been looking at my finances, trying to figure out how to pay you back. I can sell the car, maybe move to a smaller apartment. It'll take time, but I want to make this right. Leo, are you doing this because you understand what you did wrong, or because you're facing consequences you don't like? The question clearly caught him off guard. He was quiet for a long moment. Both, I guess. Does that make me a bad person? It makes you human. But Leo, if you're only sorry because you got caught, if you're only changing because the alternative is worse, then nothing real will change. I know, that's what the therapist said too. You've already seen the therapist. Yesterday, I couldn't wait for the appointment. I called and begged them to see me immediately. His voice cracked slightly. "Mom, I think I'm having some kind of breakdown." I can't stop thinking about the look on Nadia's face when she realized I'd lied to her. I can't stop thinking about the things I said to you. For the first time since discovering the theft, I felt genuine hope. Not that everything would go back to the way it was, that would never happen, but that maybe Leo was finally ready to do the hard work of becoming someone better. That sounds like the beginning of real change, I said gently. The therapist asked me when I started being ashamed of you, and I couldn't answer. I don't remember a specific moment. It was gradual, like I slowly convinced myself that your life was too small, that I needed to distance myself from it to become who I wanted to be. And who did you want to be? Someone who mattered, someone important, someone who belonged in the world I was trying to enter. Leo, you always mattered, you always belonged. Just not in the way you thought you needed to. 3 weeks later, I received an unexpected call from Nadia. I was surprised to hear from her, but pleased. In the short time I'd known her, I'd come to genuinely like and respect her. "Camilla, I hope you don't mind me calling. I got your number from Leo." "Of course not. Dear, how are you doing?" "I'm okay. It's been hard, but I think I made the right choice. I actually called because I wanted to thank you again for the necklace and to tell you something." "What's that?" "Leo came to see me yesterday. He's been trying to contact me for weeks, but I haven't been ready to talk to him. But yesterday, something was different about him. He didn't try to justify what he'd done or convince me to take him back. He just apologized. I sat down, feeling my heart rate pick up. How did that go? He told me he understood why I left, and that he didn't expect me to give him another chance. He said he was in therapy and was committed to becoming a better person, not because he wanted me back, but because he realized he needed to change for his own sake. And what did you say? I told him I was glad he was getting help, but that I wasn't ready to think about our relationship yet, maybe never. And he said he understood that too. I felt proud of Leo in a way I hadn't in years. The man who'd stolen from me and blamed me for the consequences wouldn't have been capable of that kind of conversation. There's something else, Nadja continued. He asked me to give you a message. What message? He said to tell you that he's finally starting to understand the difference between wanting something and deserving it. And that he's sorry it took losing everything for him to remember the lessons you tried to teach him. After Nadja and I hung up, I sat in my reading chair and thought about the 8-year-old boy who'd wanted to keep the lost wallet. Maybe that moment hadn't been as telling as I'd thought. Maybe it had just been a child testing boundaries, learning what was acceptable and what wasn't. Maybe the real lesson hadn't been in my making him turn in the wallet, but in his eventual understanding of why it was the right thing to do. That evening, I called Rita and told her about Leo's message. So what now? She asked. Are you going to forgive him? I think I already have, I said, surprising myself with the realization. Not because what he did was okay, but because carrying anger is exhausting, and I don't want to be exhausted anymore. But you're not going back to the way things were. No, that relationship was based on me making myself small so he could feel big. I'm done with that. Good, because I like this version of you better. What do you mean? You're taking up space now. You're not apologizing for existing. You bought yourself flowers yesterday just because you wanted to, not because it was a special occasion. You signed up for that cooking class you've been talking about for years. You're living like you matter. She was right. In the weeks since the wedding, I'd started making choices based on what I wanted instead of what was practical or modest or unobtrusive. I'd bought the flowers, signed up for the class, made a hair appointment at a salon instead of cutting it myself. Small things, but they added up to something bigger. Life lived intentionally instead of apologetically. Rita, can I ask you something? Always. Do you think I'll ever hear from Leo again? Really hear from him, not just obligation calls or attempts to manage the situation. I think that depends on whether he's really changing or just going through the motions because his life fell apart. But calm, either way, you're going to be okay. You prove that to yourself. A month later, I was coming back from my cooking class. We'd made osobuco, something I never would have attempted before, when I found Leo sitting on the steps outside my building. He looked different, thinner, less polished, wearing jeans and a simple sweater instead of his usual expensive clothes. Hi, Mom, Leo, what are you doing here? I wanted to see you, to talk, if you're willing. I studied his face, looking for signs of the manipulative charm he'd used so often before, the calculated approach designed to get what he wanted. Instead, I saw something I hadn't seen in years: genuine uncertainty, like he wasn't sure what reception he'd get and was prepared for any outcome. Come up, I said, finally. In my apartment, Leo looked around with what seemed like new eyes. I never noticed how nice this place is, he said. It's peaceful, comfortable. It's always been this way. I know. I just wasn't capable of seeing it before. I made tea while he sat at my small kitchen table, the same table where we'd had our confrontation about the money. But the energy was completely different now. No anger, no defensiveness, just a kind of tired honesty. How's therapy going? I asked, sitting across from him. Hard, really hard. The therapist makes me examine every choice I've made, every assumption I've held about what makes life worth living. It turns out I've been operating from some pretty messed up beliefs for a long time, such as the idea that love means getting what you want without having to earn it, such as thinking that if someone loves you, they should accept any treatment you give them, such as believing that image is more important than integrity. He was quiet for a moment, staring into his tea. I wrote you a letter, he said finally, pulling an envelope from his jacket pocket. Everything I want to say to you. Everything I should have said years ago. I was going to mail it, but then I thought maybe I should give it to you in person, so you could ask me questions if you wanted to. I took the envelope, but didn't open it immediately. Leo, what do you want from me? Nothing, he said. And I believed him. I mean, I'd like a relationship with you someday, if you think that's possible. But I don't expect it, and I'm not trying to manipulate you into it. I just wanted you to know that I'm working on becoming someone different, someone better. What about the money? I sold the car and most of my expensive stuff. I moved to a studio apartment in Capitol Hill. I've got about $15,000 to give you now, and a plan to pay back the rest over the next 3 years, with interest. He reached into his other pocket and pulled out a check, which he placed on the table between us. This doesn't make us even, he said. Money can't fix what I did to our relationship, but it's a start. I looked at the check, more money than I'd expected to see again, and felt a complex mix of relief and sadness. Relief that Leo was finally taking responsibility, sadness that it had taken such a dramatic confrontation to get us here. Have you talked to Nadja recently? A few times. We're not getting back together, that ship has sailed, and I understand why. But we're trying to find a way to be friends someday. She's an amazing person, Mom. She deserves so much better than what I gave her. She's wearing my mother's pearls to important events, I said. She sent me a photo from her cousin's wedding last week. They look beautiful on her. Leo smiled. And it was the first genuine smile I'd seen from him in years. I'm glad she has them. I never deserved to pass them on to someone. We talked for another hour, mostly about his therapy and his new job. He'd taken a position at a non-profit that paid much less than his corporate job, but felt more meaningful. He was learning to measure success differently, he said, by impact rather than income. When he prepared to leave, we stood awkwardly by the door, unsure how to say goodbye. Finally, Leo reached out and hugged me, a real hug that lasted longer than the brief, obligatory embraces we'd exchanged for years. Mom, I know I can't undo what I did, but I want you to know that losing you, really losing you, was worse than losing everything else combined. You matter more than I ever let you know. After he left, I sat with his letter for a long time before opening it. Inside were 4 pages of handwriting, words that chronicled his understanding of how he'd hurt me, his gratitude for everything I'd sacrificed for him, and his commitment to becoming someone worthy of my love, not to win me back, but because it was the right thing to do. At the end, he'd written, you taught me that character is what you do when you're tested. I failed that test spectacularly, but I'm grateful you loved me enough to let me face the consequences. I'm finally ready to learn what you were trying to teach me all along. I folded the letter carefully and put it in the drawer with my important papers. Then I called Rita. How did it go? She asked immediately. Different, better, real, for the first time in years. Are you getting back together? We're starting over, I said. Building something new instead of trying to fix something that was broken. It'll take time, and it might not work, but at least it's honest, and the money, he's paying it back. But more importantly, he understands now that some things can't be bought or stolen, they have to be earned. That night, I looked through old photo albums again, but this time with different eyes. I saw the young mother who'd worked so hard to give her son opportunities, but I also saw the woman who'd gradually made herself smaller to accommodate his growing ego. I saw the love and sacrifice, but also the enabling and fear. Both versions of myself had been real, but I preferred the woman. I was becoming someone who could love fiercely without losing herself, someone who could offer forgiveness without accepting abuse, someone who could take up space in her own life. 6 months later, Leo and I had dinner together for the first time since the wedding. He'd chosen a simple restaurant in my neighborhood, nothing fancy or expensive, and we talked like 2 adults getting to know each other rather than like mother and son trying to navigate old patterns. He was different, more thoughtful, less concerned with impressing me and more interested in understanding me. He asked about my cooking classes, my volunteer work, my plans for the future. He listened when I talked about maybe taking that trip to Europe I'd always dreamed of. using some of the money he paid back. You should do it, he said. You should do everything you've been putting off. I'm thinking about it, Poland first. To see where my mother grew up, then maybe Italy or France. I'd love to hear about it when you get back. When I get back, I agreed, liking the sound of certainty in my voice. As we walked back to my apartment after dinner, Leo said, Mom, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you think we'll ever have a normal relationship, like other mothers and sons? I thought about it, about what normal meant, about whether our relationship had ever been normal or healthy. I don't think we'll ever be normal, I said finally. What we went through changed us both too much for that. But maybe we can be something better than normal. Maybe we can be honest. I'd like that, Leo said. Honest sounds good. A year after the wedding that never was, I received an invitation in the mail. It was simple, elegant, nothing like the elaborate affair Leo had planned with my money. Nadja Jensen and David Park request your presence at their wedding, it read, followed by details for a small ceremony at a botanical garden. At the bottom, in handwriting I recognized as Nadja's, was a note. I would be honored if you would wear your mother's pearls to my wedding. Love, Nadja. I called her immediately. I wasn't sure you'd want to come, she said when she heard my voice. I know it might be awkward, given everything that happened. I would love to come, I said honestly. And Nadja? I'm so happy you found someone who deserves you. David's wonderful. He's a teacher, very down to earth. Nothing like ... double quote. She paused, then continued more carefully. He's nothing like the person Leo was when I met him. Though I have to say, Leo's changed a lot. He sent me a card when David and I got engaged, just congratulating me and wishing me happiness. It was very mature. 2 weeks later, I sat in a beautiful garden watching Nadja marry a man who clearly adored her. She was radiant, in a simple white dress, and around her neck were my mother's pearls, catching the afternoon sunlight. When the officiant asked if anyone objected to the union, the pause was filled with bird songs and rustling leaves instead of the tension that had marked her first wedding attempt. After the ceremony, Nadja found me during the reception. Thank you for coming, she said, touching the pearls gently. These brought me luck. I think they brought you courage, I corrected. The luck was yours all along, Camilla. I want you to know something. What happened at my first wedding, as terrible as it was at the time, led me to David. If I'd married Leo, I never would have met the person I was meant to be with. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you is really the best thing in disguise. As I watched her rejoin her new husband, I thought about the truth of that statement. Leo's betrayal had been devastating, but it had also freed both of us to become better versions of ourselves. He was learning to build a life based on integrity rather than image. I was learning to take up space instead of apologizing for my existence. On the bus ride home, I pulled out my phone and looked at the email I received that morning, confirmation for my flight to Warsaw, the first stop on the European trip I'd been planning for months. At 63, I was finally going to see the city where my mother grew up, was going to walk the street she'd walked before the war changed everything. I thought about her pearls, now around the neck of a young woman who'd chosen courage over comfort, integrity over security. I thought about the lessons my mother had tried to teach me about standing up for myself, lessons I'd taken too long to learn, but had finally embraced. The bus pulled up to my stop, and I gathered my purse and sweater, stepping out into the Seattle evening. My apartment was waiting for me, modest but comfortable, a space that belonged entirely to me. Tomorrow I would finish packing for my trip. Next week I would board a plane to Europe. Something I'd dreamed of doing for decades, but had always found reasons to postpone. But tonight, I would make myself a cup of tea and sit in my reading chair and feel grateful for the long, complicated journey that had brought me to this place, a place where I finally understood the difference between being loved and being respected, between being needed and being valued, between making yourself small for others and making yourself whole for yourself. The woman who'd sat in that same chair a year ago, crying over bank statements and feeling invisible, seemed like a stranger now. That woman had been afraid of taking up space, afraid of demanding what she deserved, afraid of losing love if she set boundaries. This woman, the one walking up the steps to her apartment with her head held high, was afraid of nothing except wasting any more time on apologizing for her existence. And that, I thought as I put my key in the lock, made all the difference. Up next we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.